Yeah, there you go. It's the hint.
God damn it, John. Dude, I brought the physical security truck. You want to with Brad because he couldn't make it.
Yeah, Brad, that's what you get for not showing up.
Yeah, dude.
What?
Did you like my presentation?
Presentation was thoroughly enjoyed.
Whoa.
Oh, this is awesome.
Alright, but where's Ken?
You guys are good.
Alright, cool.
Can't beat out Ken.
We were done.
So,
It was great.
hey everyone. We are one of the capstone teams this semester at 490. We're presenting on our project we've been working on this semester, a proposal for a new GCI cyber range course. So to start out, Agatha Christie once said, everything must be taken into account. If the fact will not fit the theory, let the theory go. This touches on a important relationship between facts and theories in CSEC that I'll get into in a moment. But in essence, there are a lot of college courses that basically teach facts and procedures over their corresponding theories and critical thinking processes. And this can actually result in students generating erroneous conclusions and methods in both cases. This is really prevalent in cybersecurity, where the majority of our work is analyzing someone else's security models or methods. And sometimes you can't even talk with your client, such in the case of a black box pen test. So I'm pretty sure most people here have taken us like a Psych 101 at some point. You've all heard of the theory of the left and right side of the brain, right? So the theory is that the brain's two hemispheres generally function a bit differently. The left side of the brain is like logic, sequencing, linear thinking, data analysis, pattern recognition, etc. The right side of the brain is imagination, feeling, nonverbal cues, rhythm, things like that. So we believe that most cybersecurity classes tend to focus more on the analysis side of the brain, also like teaching methods, procedures, and tools. But we really should be trying to teach to both sides, specifically intuition, holistic thought, feeling, visualization, and the like. Because like, after all, we're doing a CTF this weekend. When's the last time you solved a CTF challenge with just straight methods alone? So this is what we're calling the human sociopsychological aspect of cybersecurity. It's basically how the thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and perceptions of individuals are influenced by the actual, imagined, and implied presence of others observing the individual. So this is the right brain cyber. While left brain cyber can answer the who, what, where, and when of cyber incidents, the right brain cyber can answer why. Why did the incident occur? Is there anything we can do to stop it? What were the attacker's motivations? The human side of cybersecurity is primarily composed of defensive corrective actions, although when you get into larger organizations, say like the CIA, you start to get into more of the offensive side of things there. Such an aspect of cybersecurity is important because, believe it or not, we're actually somewhat on a two-way street with liberal arts disciplines, specifically criminal justice and psychology. So this is our team. You kind of know us already. So we're all up here. We are doing this course in collaboration with another course. Shout out to Shannon, Enzo, and Loudon. They're doing the social engineering course, which is corresponding with this. So we're here, we're in the cyber range. Essentially, cyber range courses are professional development courses. There are opportunities to focus on immersive scenarios and training, unlike a traditional college course. So the courses can be 1 to 15 weeks and can range from a few hours to full work days in length. We're building a 2-week course that will run for maybe 1 to 2 hours a day. The current cybersecurity bootcamp that's running right now is a 15-week experience that runs after hours. But the big difference between college courses and cyber range courses is that they're focusing on immersive training. So this is a lot like a SANS course, if anyone has taken those. Students feel like they're directly involved in the simulation. Faculty can produce simulations on demand. We were demoing the table shaking earlier. Some courses may even provide alternate reality storylines or experiences. So this is our course goal. We're essentially trying to introduce human aspects of computer security to students so that they can learn the theories of intelligence gathering and then apply those theories to the specific tools that they will be learning later in how to use intelligence, rather than spending time demoing like the man-page of a tool and how to like specifically use it for certain cases in class, when that time could be used to teach like theories and experiences of how to conduct such investigations. So we're focusing on a lot of different things in this course, as it is 2 weeks. We're going to try and touch on different topics per day, specifically OSINT, web reconnaissance, social media, physical, geospatial, financial, and threat intelligence. We're going to try and give you a preview of some of each of these today.
Provide the clicker. Hello, friends. I haven't talked here before, so this is a fun time. But yeah, the learning outcomes of the course are varied, to say the least. We're going to try to go for each day from a more kind of broad idea and then kind of narrowed down to more specific things. So we start with kind of giving more basic idea of how to gather intelligence, then go down to organizing, actually, hunting for these things, and then finally going down to analyzing and creating reports that might be actionable, in the actual industry of investigation. We also add a few more interesting things in here as well. One of the things is the use of sock puppets and burner phones. So in social media kind of recon, in all of this, you generally don't want to be using your main accounts. This way, we use burner phones to generate those accounts and kind of drill down into these spaces more anonymously. And we also do a kind of tracelab CTF as well to actually get in on the real missing persons cases. So this is the part where I need the speakers in it. So we're going to try to go through each one of these days, or at least a few of these days, and kind of highlight the bigger topics. So day one specifically focuses on the intelligence tradecraft, showing how to kind of just generally create reports, kind of gather the initial intelligence. Skipping on to 3, focusing on how to be anonymous. Focus on some of the bigger contexts of doxing and why it may be an issue as in adjacent to some of the other more spooky bits of the internet. Moving on to physical recon, we kind of blend the next 2 days with social media and OSINT on the web into day 3. But getting out into the field is actually a big one with physical recon. So we have a kind of war walking thing that we plan to do with this, looking for insecure wireless signals around campus and tracking them down, digging into them. Finally, on this slide at least, we have accounts and data breaches. So password dumps on the internet are a huge thing. Digging into paste bins, all that kind of stuff. This isn't usually taught, but the way that our team has kind of sorted this out is that we've actually gotten a few of these indexed. So there will be the possibility for students or participants in this course to actually look at those a bit more in depth as well. The last 4 days are kind of a little bit of a smattering with a divide between 10 and 12, 11 being where the capture the flag activity is. But 9 and 10, that's financial intelligence first. So we kind of give a bit of a briefing on, just basic financial tracking using normal methods, and then a little bit more of blockchain exploration as well. Part of the course involves a bit of that in the later portions, along with, dark web investigations as well. We're currently in talks with the cyber range right now, seeing whether or not we'd be able to get some, actual onion routing on that. That's more internal. That's a little bit more, not spooky out on the actual onion web, but yeah. And the last 2 days are kind of a bit of a wrap up to the course. An introduction to counterintelligence being the last thing, which I'll be talking about a little bit more towards the end of this presentation, and vulnerabilities and threat intelligence, just showing you, or rather the students, how to, actually protect against these things they might come up against. But this is all, the analytical side of things. The world building is super important for us as well. So I'm not sure if anyone's here has heard of brick wall cyber just yet. Yep, got a few heads, great. This is what the cyber range has built up as kind of a shell company. The facade that the cyber range is using, it's very well developed. It has a fake website, has a whole thing you could go down the rabbit hole on. And to that extent, we've, as a group, created Bridgewater Investigations. Now, this is going to be our investigations agency, adjacent to Brickwall Cyber, but not connected. And it will have, the kind of storyline revolving around it. The world building focuses here. And with that, we've created 4 main sock puppets with this as well. We have one, we blacked out the faces, of course, that is the subject of the investigation. We have another that's the CEO, who kind of starts the entire thing along. And then we have two others. One is a manager who'd kind of like, focus down on like, what individuals are doing as investigators at this company that are trying to find this person. And then we have an ex-girlfriend who's a suspect in the disappearance. She may or may not get a lot of mileage out later in this course, but it's a whole thing. Why? Would you like to take it back?
Yes. Can I use the little laser pointer thing, guys? You can't really see it.
It's the white background.
Yeah. Oh well. Right. So we've got a couple of main components for this course. We're trying to do lectures, sort of like interactive lectures. So like the instructor is actually having a conversation with all of the students while we're learning. We're doing in-class activities where students can take what they've learned at the day in lecture and apply the theories to a short in-class exercise to help kind of solidify what they've learned and so that they can feel comfortable applying it to specific tools and techniques later on. We have labs, which I just mentioned, and then we have a CTF challenge. So each day we'll start with a lecture and activity. Here are some of our slides that we've written so far. Basically, our slides contain information, visual aids, links to tangential sources and information. We're really trying to build, since there's no like really solid modern textbook on intelligence collection, we're trying to essentially build the textbook for this course into our slides. So we're trying to just pack them with information and links and other things that might be interested in so that students can get the full experience of the course while being taught and also while they're maybe at home and want to review. So some of these activities that we're going to be doing like during class will focus on blockchain immutability, automated OSINT collection, geolocating photos, dark web safety, and similar. Our labs are where they're kind of following a do and discuss format where we'll have an activity for students to do, and then they'll engage and work either independently or in teams in the way investigations are actually like conducted in the real world. And then they will also get together a group and discuss their experiences, learn from other people like, hey, there's maybe another way to collect this information, or there's another technique that you could apply to find the exact same thing. Because investigations, you can go like so many different ways and get to the exact same information. It's impossible to cover every one of them. But a good intelligence analyst will have the intuition to know which ways and how to pivot with certain types of information to gain access to their target or the goal in the end. So we are currently writing or have written a bunch of different labs. This one is on intelligence workflows. We're also writing one on Analyst Notebook, one on Streisand VPN, Punchly. We also have two on sock puppets and war walking, as we previously mentioned. So we have, on day 10, we're going to be doing a CTF, where students will investigate a real missing persons using TraceLab's ongoing operations. TraceLabs, I'm sure some of you know, is a nonprofit organization founded in 2017 by Rob Sell. He was a tracker for search and rescue and a computer security professional. They started search parties to find missing persons and children worldwide. Now they've done 300 investigations across 35 search parties, and they do things like at DEF CON, Layer 8 Con. They have CONINT, new conference in the fall that's pretty fun to participate in. So basically, we chose to do TraceLab's ongoing investigations instead of an actual global search party, because that way there's no time constraint to a specific weekend. There's no registration fee for students to get a similar experience. There's no competitive pressure for many first-time intelligence analysts, like we don't want to force them into a competition environment. And it allows us to customize the workflow of the investigation so that we can kind of have students learn and investigate at their own pace. So basically, we hope to offer this course in fall 2021 or spring 2022 for the cyber range, depending on timing and other factors, such as like the return of in-person classes, however that's going to work out. Justin, the cyber range director, has mentioned the opportunity to offer it to RIT-Sec at some point. We don't know what's going on with that, but hopefully it'll work out. And we eventually hope that this will turn into a full undergraduate course after several runs, and we've worked out all of the bugs and developed like a full course offering. So right now, we're working on with GCI to set up investigative resources and labs. We're also working, hopefully soon, with TraceLabs to get this certified as an actual intelligence training course for their search parties. So crossing our fingers, they'll respond to us and actually have some interest. This would be really cool to have happen. Now we're going to get into a preview of day 1, which is Intro to Intelligence Tradecraft, as I previously said. This day provides a foundational overview of the intelligence trade, as well as like introduces basic terminology for how intelligence is gathered. Day talks about the meaning of intelligence, types of intelligence, the collection cycle, some psychological aspects of intelligence. We also go into applications and examples of how intelligence is provided. For this demo, we can really only cover at most these two things, because otherwise this is like 60 to 80 slides and way too long. So we're going to start out by talking about what is intelligence, how you can start an investigation, and really what intelligence means in this field. By defining intelligence, it's really the collection of information resulting from collection, collation, evaluation, analysis, integration, and interpretation. Lots of words, I know. We'll get into like how this actually works in a minute. So intelligence is typically of military, economic, civil, legal, or political value, and it might be gathered by governments or state agencies, law enforcement, financial units, private investigators, or other organizations. Let's see, there's 5 of those. Yeah, there's 5 traditional intelligence. I don't think the laser pointer is really going to work. So these 5 traditional intelligence points were really generally pioneered, and they were started by government organizations, mostly the United States. So they were not really accessible to citizens of the private sector until recently with the expansion of the internet. But they were pioneered by governments and recently have been available to everyone now, and more people are using them. The modern forms of intelligence that we'll touch on in a bit are intelligence basically post-internet era, where we now have like things that are actually built into the internet, like cyber intelligence, financial intelligence, social media intelligence. So get ready for some of these acronyms. Signals intelligence, SIGINT, intelligence derived from interception of disruption of electronic signals and systems. I really want to point out here that SIGINT is almost always about what a signal is carrying as opposed to a signal itself, because the signal itself is a different type of intelligence I'll touch on in a little bit. There are 2 primary subfields, communications intelligence, which is COMINT, and electronic intelligence, which is ELINT. So SIGINT provides intelligence analysts with who, when, where, and why of communications or collection activities. And a couple of pictures here. RAF Menwith Hill in the UK is one of the largest electronic monitoring stations in the world, as well as like we've got General Dynamics Prophet, which is a mobile collection station, and we have a reconnaissance UAV for SIGINT. Now, I didn't list any ships here. There's no really Navy or any other sort of aquatic-based ships. Does anybody know why I didn't list any ships on this slide? Major guess? That's fine. So I'll ask it a different way. There were 2 incidents in the 1960s. Usually it was concerning the US and 2 other countries. One was in the Middle East and another was in Asia. You might be able to guess them now, but we'll see. So we had 2 incidents with what used to be, or what were supposed to be called, marine research ships that were actually spy ships for the Navy. And these ships had conflicts in these areas, and since they weren't armed, generally they didn't go super well for us. So we decided to rethink that whole strategy and do intelligence collection, sea-based intelligence collection from battleships or submarines or other things that have weapons and can get away fast. Does anybody know the name of these 2 ships? They're pretty famous incidents from the 1960s.
Just answer your own question.
No history people in here?
No? All right, cool. So they were the USS Liberty, which was accidentally destroyed by Israel in 1967. And the other one was the USS Pueblo, which was captured by North Korea in 1968, and they've still got it. It's, of course, rusting now, but they've painted it up all nicely, at least one side of it, and it's sitting over in Pyongyang Harbor for like people to go see, like, hey, look what we took from the Americans 50 years ago. Ooh. So that's why we primarily don't use sea-based from small research spy ships anymore. So next we have measurement intelligence. This is what I was talking about earlier, where I said like the metadata of a signal. So it's scientific and technical intelligence derived from signals, and it's about the contents of the signal. It's about the metadata of the signal, where SIGINT is about the contents of the signal. There are 3 subfields here: radar intelligence, which is RADINT, so like tracking and spatial measurements. There's RFINT, which is radio frequencies. These are actually usually, I mean, we gather them intentionally, but these are usually transmitted unintentionally. You generally can't stop electromagnetic waves from just like emanating from any type of technology you have. This is partially how the US identified the Russian SIGINT station in Lourdes, Cuba during the Cold War. So we also have electro-optant, which is basically UV and infrared light. Like I said, these are quite the acronyms, but this is government stuff. So, MASINT allows intelligence analysts to detect, track, identify, and describe sources. I've included a picture of Cobra Dane here, which is a radar unit in Alaska that was formerly used to gather information about Russia's ICBM program during the Cold War. Human intelligence is the collection of information from human sources. So there are 3 types of this, and the most secret of them are usually used like special reconnaissance teams and implement plausible deniability. Plausible deniability being like the ability to deny knowledge or responsibility for risky or dangerous actions by your subordinates. Really handy in the case of the Iran-Contra affair, which occurred during President Reagan's term. So technically, they're speaking, these 3 types are overt. So they are conducted openly without concealment. Covert or sensitive operations, which are planned and executed so that the sponsor isn't specifically identified or may not have knowledge of this where the actions to be exposed. And clandestine, which are basically ensures secrecy of the entire thing. We don't really know the purpose or the sponsor. Geospatial intelligence, or GeoINT, is intelligence about human activity on Earth. This one only has one real subfield, and it's basically the one that everybody uses, imagery intelligence. It's conducted via satellite. This type of intelligence used to be one of those that was really inaccessible to people until this little car down below came along and Google started just mapping literally like everybody's house and driveway and caused a ton of security concerns back in like 2005, 2006-ish. So if you ever go anywhere in Google Maps though, important note, try to look at important government buildings. They're almost always the only thing in an area that is not 3D rendered for good reason. Open source intelligence. This is the one that's taught literally everywhere. So it's intelligence developed from sources that are free and available to access, like bulletin boards, or online sources like, I guess, like Wikipedia, publications, blogs, other things like that. So as you can see, I've listed all the categories here. I'm not going to read them totally, but I do want to touch on the last one here, which is gray literature. So gray literature is a special case of open source intelligence where it's not something that was necessarily public to begin with or intended to become public. But say it was like an internal newsletter that doesn't have any special like data markings for business or government on it, and it just ended up like somebody sent this to a journalist, oops, or something like that. So gray literature just kind of ends up in the public, or isn't public, but has a high tendency to be publicized at some point during its production or creation or dissemination. And you can see this a lot with like high-profile companies too. Like I know Tesla, literally every email Elon Musk sends to his employees or the shareholders gets sent to the press, and like that's gray literature. It's not intended to be public, but it just ends up out there, and you can't do much about it. So it's cyber threat intelligence, digital network intelligence. This is a really new field. It's basically real-time intelligence that provides usually countries with stuff that would create a distinct advantage in cyber conflicts. So, as I said earlier, cyber intelligence is primarily like, it's literally just one field right now. It's pretty new. So we have like technical intelligence, vulnerabilities, and the use of vulnerabilities in cyber weapons by armed forces or unfortunately criminal groups as well. This is where you get into your APT sort of scenarios. But as you can see, IBM and a couple other companies are getting in on it as well. Financial intelligence, or FINIT, is the analysis of an entity's monetary transactions for identifying usually illegal activities, like adversaries, criminal activities, terrorist activities. This is actually how the SEC caught on to the Enron and Arthur Andersen scandals back in 2001. If you don't know, Enron was a large energy corporation that was committing massive financial fraud for its shareholders, and was eventually found out, and just their stock price, I'm pretty sure, tanked from like over $100 to down to 1 cent in just a matter of weeks, and nobody wanted to touch it, nobody wanted to buy it. They had been forging for so long that they had turned this basically shell of company that had very little assets and debt into something that was worth millions of dollars. So it was caught on in October 2001. The SEC had a heyday by prosecuting this, and it was all identified through financial intelligence, transaction tracing, forensic accounting, other things like that. Also, just a fun little side note, that Enron E is the basis for Mr. Robot's Evil Corp. Connection. So Financial intelligence usually is used for they usually use data mining to analyze large volumes of transaction data, identify malicious patterns. So a big part of this is suspicious activity reports, or SARs, which is sent to the SEC, or not the SEC, the Department of the Treasury, excuse me. And it's one of the easiest ways to catch people doing probably illegal things with money, because anything you do suspicious, like depositing over $10,000 in any unit's bank account in a single day, will trigger a SAR, and the SEC, or not the SEC, the Treasury Department will start investigating. Also, due to primarily these regulations and others surrounding just traditional government-backed currency, Bitcoin and Monero are becoming two of the most popular charging protocols. Social media intelligence, or SOCMINT, which refers to the information collected from social media websites. The good majority of this is publicly accessible, not publicly accessible. You will need an account to access a lot of this. And there are a couple different categories. They seem pretty obvious: posts, replies, multimedia interactions, but also the metadata that these sites gather from you visiting them. So we all heard of the Cambridge Analytica scandal from 2018. My policy and law class spent literally 2-3 weeks talking about just this scandal. This is a great application of social media intelligence put to a really bad use. So basically, don't go around taking random internet surveys. Now we're going to get on to Brendan McGlynn, who's going to talk to us about social media.
Go ahead. Everybody, can you guys hear me well in the back? Just checking.
Bro, we got you.
Sounds good? All right, sweet. So I'm going to give a quick and brief high-level overview for 2 topics. So the Surbridge course is broken to 14-ish days, and so each of us kind of picked 3 of our own to work on. And the most fleshed out that I have so far is internet anonymity and social media reconnaissance. And some of the content goes hand in hand, so I'll give a quick overlap for how that happens. So anonymity, there's 3 buzzwords or vocab terms: is anonymity itself, internet anonymity, and anonymity systems. It's my least favorite word to pronounce, but let's go. So anonymity is this condition in which you do not reveal your identity. Simple as itself, anonymous. You can imagine those dudes wouldn't want to expose their identities. Of course, that's unrelated to the term itself. Internet anonymity is when you want to remain anonymous, but when you're on the internet. So how can you go about this? Well, if you want to be doing OSINT, you're not just going to pop onto your laptop, start typing away and Googling everything because you don't want your public IP to be associated with every site you visit. That's not cool for you. And then anonymity systems are systems which are built to support internet anonymity in itself. So these systems themselves, there's a bunch of different types of infrastructures which can be classified as anonymity systems. And there's different classifications. There's high latency ones and low latency. So basically, the way in which these infrastructures are built with, I'll talk about this a bit more in the next slide coming up, but information is transferred within them in ways that have different protocols that can operate within a high latency scenario, like email. You know how for certain protocols like TCP, you want the assurance that your message delivery will be happening. It's going to be a much slower process. Whereas low latency systems, if you think about something like onion routing, which you're going to be able to access sites in a very short period of time, you want to be able to make sure your communications can happen anonymously, but you want to be able to do that within a short period of time. And mixed networks are a form of an anonymity system. As you can see, there's 3 different beautiful types of networks, and there's a lot of heated debates, kind of like for, I guess, a lot of STP type stuff on where people fight over, oh, this is the best way to set up this type of network, or this way is cooler, or this way is more efficient. So it's case by case scenario on what you want to do with your anonymity system. And basically, these allow for just 1 or 2-way anonymous communications between parties. So let's break it down to how it works. Clients generate cipher messages, and then kind of like Tor, which is an anonymity system in itself, messages can get sent to and from clients, and their message delivery process is anonymous in itself. And so the way in which messages in anonymity systems are kept anonymous is through batching. So there's a bunch of different batching strategies. There's 7 that are outlined in a report from Washington University in St. Louis. Not going into all those right now, but that is essentially a strategy for managing how these messages should be delivered. Onion routing, if you watch the pilot of Mr. Robot, you're already an expert in this topic. But I'll go over a quick basic overview of how it works. There are 4 components. There's the onion itself, which is an layered encrypted data object. And then there's, of course, routers, proxies, and exit nodes. And a lot of this information, of course, like if you're familiar with her, you already know what the deal is with how these work. Routers, and essentially it's a bunch of nodes sporadically set out, and information is sent. So when you do TCP communications, it is essentially sent via segments. And essentially with onion routing, there is information in cells, which are sent through a circuit. And then symmetric keys are basically kept between nodes to allow for information to be decrypted when sent from one node to another. To unveil one layer like an onion, to move on to the next layer, unveil it, send it to the next node, until you reach the end of the process on which the exit node is reached. And then information from the exit node to the final destination isn't anonymous in itself, because you can see that exit node, but you get the process. So just a quick high-level overview of Tor. And moving on from that, to promote anonymity systems, one lab activity for the cyber range course is deploying Streisand. So a lot of people in CSAC love Taylor Swift. People in Threat Intel love Barbara Streisand. So there's a whole phenomenon called the Streisand effect. It's actually kind of fun, so I'll talk about it. So basically, she has a home in Malibu, California. It's beautiful. It's on the coastline. There was a company, I think in like 2003, that was doing aerial photography and getting footage of the coastline, and she's like, my house is too cool for this. I don't want to be a part of that. She complained about it. She went public and got angry. And so, of course, creating all that buzz and drama got people even like more obsessed to like view photos of her house. Like basically, she brought way too much negative attention to herself, even though she didn't want to anyway. Anywho, basically, that's the creation of the Streisand effect, in which you want to attempt to have censorship. Basically, Streisand wanted information to be kept censored. She didn't want her house to be photographed and be a part of that image collection. So the Streisand effect is essentially attempts at censorship, which kind of end up being counterproductive. So Streisand, you can simply deploy it on a host. You can deploy it on your own host, which isn't really doing you any favors. You can ideally have a cloud instance, whatever you want. There's a list provided in the screenshot up above. And for the live activity in the cyber range course, basically there is a version of RLIS for the cyber range itself. You're going to be deploying Streisand on one of those boxes so that if you want to be performing social media reconnaissance or OSINT in the cyber range course, you can simply connect to that box as a means to perform that. So it's essentially a representation for how this type of info can be created. If you want to create your own open VPN server, that's the way you can do it via Streisand. One of my favorite topics of the whole course, sock puppets. So, not the actual puppets themselves, but how the process works. So these are fictitious online user accounts for different platforms. And it's essentially meant to basically, if you want to be able to access platforms, as Wyatt mentioned when you're doing SOCMint, like the social media OSINT in which you cannot see info because you don't have an account. You're gonna need a sock puppet account to not say, I'm Brendan, I'm gonna poke around at all these different Facebook accounts. You would essentially, if you were to hypothetically access an account or access a platform so you could view info from other accounts without having restrictions based on not being signed in, then you would create a sock puppet account. So the goals of these accounts is appear legitimate. You got to be thorough, and so much info needs to be put into these accounts in specially crafted ways. More on that on the next slide. But everything that we're doing for the cyber engine itself, our main goal is you have to stay hands off. Same with OSINT is you're not going to be adding friends. You're not going to be liking content. You're not leaving comments. You are to appear legitimate without actually being hands-on and messing with other people and other stuff, because you want to remain hands-off if you want to be a friendly and non-harmful sock puppet. So, you guys know any of these people? No, you don't. They're not real. Basically, this person does not exist as a great tool for creating profile pictures for sock puppet accounts. Other fun alternative is to do what all the cool kids on Twitter do and just pick a fun anime profile character, but that's not ideal for Facebook. They might catch on to you. You never know. It could work, but this person does not exist as a beautiful tool to help create profile pictures. My favorite part of the whole cyber range lab activity process is coming up on the next slide, which details how our process goes from making our characters. You would think, oh, just profile picture, basic bio, who cares? But if you want to be acting on a social media platform, you don't just want to, especially when you're working in a group like we have 4 people managing 4 different sock puppet accounts, how are we to make sure that info doesn't get muddy or weird, or how do we stay consistent with who these people are? You're going to want to thoroughly work out every bit of detail about these sock puppet accounts. So, in addition, you would likely have a track phone or a burner phone in order to get a phone number to associate with an email service, and so you can sign up for accounts without getting shot down instantly for being super sus. That's not cool. That's not fun. And then if you want to create these accounts, it's best to do so on a burner phone in a public Wi-Fi scenario. That's pretty legit looking without being sus for being on a VPN service. So that's how that works. All right. Our favorite tool for building stock puppet accounts is Xmind, and here's a new example I made just for the slide deck. So if you look at all these bits and details, I scrambled and got some fun random info for the very end of the trees, but I wanted to essentially demonstrate some of the info that we have to sit down and think and find out. If people are a psych puppet, they gotta be born somewhere, they gotta move around, they'll go to schools, they go to college, they have potentially parents, siblings, are they in a relationship? Do they have a car? Is it a Saturn? What's the license plate number? This is all stupid. It sounds like, why do we care? But if you want to appear legitimate on social media and you want to answer questions, like, what could this person's leaked password be? Maybe they're interested in this type of book. Maybe they like this author. So every bit and every specific detail about these characters, if you want to make good sock puppet accounts, you got to think through all this type of information. So there's a bit of that. And going back to what Wyatt mentioned earlier with Trace Labs, a few of us got the opportunity to work in one of these search parties back in February. And we kind of did this as a means to put our social media recon skills to the test, and also a bit of standard typical OSINT. And essentially it's a gamified effort for finding missing people in these searches. And so we just did this opportunity as a way to walk through the different tools for social media recon. And let's see, I have some of these tools that we got from our time there. So hash edit, if you find a cool hashtag that you can somehow associate with a piece of info, let's say there's a cool club Ritzek, that's a hashtag. I didn't specifically do that for this slide. You can do hashtag Ritzek on hash edit. You get a list of social media platforms where people reference Ritzek. If you want to gather intel on Ritzek, boom, you can do it that way. My favorite two, check usernames and what's my name. When we did Trace Labs, this was my favorite tool, even though it's super simple. The whole point of it is, if you like the idea of a handle, let's say you want to be Joe Schmo, that's your handle. Except you don't know if Joe Schmo is available. You can just search it on check usernames or what's my name, and it'll show the availability of that. Why is that good for intel? Well, if, let's say you want to do recon on, I don't know, the baby. You know his handle. You put the baby's username into check usernames. You can see all the platforms in which that character is found. And then you can instantly say, oh, cool, I didn't know he has a Pinterest. That's a piece of intel. Oh, sick, he has a Bandcamp. Every bit and piece of intel could be useful in an investigation, especially at Trace Labs. So this is the kind of tools you got to experiment with. And that is it for my content. So passing on to Emily for vulnerabilities and vulnerability.
Yeah, so I'm going to pivot to later on in our course to day 12, so a bit later than day 3 and 5, going over vulnerabilities and threat intelligence, and within that also threat attribution, and then ending up with instant response process. So to first start off, you have to kind of define what vulnerabilities are. Basic definition, they're a flaw or weakness that can be exploited. Given the fact that the cyber range is part of workforce training, they're going to be interested in vulnerabilities at their businesses. The place to look for that is in the National Vulnerability Database with CVEs, common vulnerabilities and exposures. There are public known vulnerabilities, and an important part is that they're ranked by their common vulnerability scoring system, the CVSS. That's going to be ranking on the severity of the exploit against that vulnerability, how easy it is to exploit it, if there's an exploit out there, and on how much access can be gained for exploiting the vulnerability. An example I have up on the screen is CV 2017-5638 that has a rating of 10. It was a vulnerability in Apache Strut that was actually exploited as part of the Equifax database. It was an error in file error and exception handling, and with that, the attackers got access to a login and then were able to get database access. Another aspect as a part of the workforce that you want to focus on when talking about vulnerabilities is scanning for vulnerabilities, whether it's scanning on your own network to patch your own vulnerabilities, or whether it's scanning a network and like a pen test type scenario to find their vulnerabilities. So Pate's tool, I have a photograph of it, is Nessus. In the photograph, as you can see, there's ranked about the severity of the vulnerabilities and descriptions about it. Another scanning tool that I think a lot of people overlook, as it's known a lot as a port scanning tool, is Nmap. With Nmap, you can use scripts, and with those scripts, you can find vulnerabilities on the host that you're scanning. So I wanted to bring that up because I think a lot of people overlook it, and it's a tool that can give you some important information on vulnerability scanning. Moving forward, getting closer to threat intelligence, are two security frameworks that we touch on in the course, under the knowledge that students have already had some experience with it. So there's the minor attack framework and the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain. The minor attack framework kind of goes through the attacker lifecycle and maps tactics, techniques, and procedures of what an adversary may do for each thing. So as you can see, there are highlights. So that would be like saying, okay, in this attack scenario that we just saw, under persistence, we saw that an adversary used like DLL search order hijacking. And then procedures are, if you click down into that, might tell you what adversaries use that and how exactly they do it. Moving on over to the right is the cyber kill chain. This was developed by Lockheed Martin to kind of go through the overall process of how adversaries they see go through an attack cycle. And this is helpful when performing threat intelligence. And threat intelligence is defined by Gartner as evidence-based knowledge, including context, mechanisms, indicators, implications, and actual advice about existing or emergent menace or hazard to assets. And so it's not just data is the important thing. You cannot just collect data and collect information and throw that out there and claim it to be threat intelligence. You need to have context, you need to understand what's happening around it, you need to have human analysis on it, which means that you can't just be an automated system. Someone has to go through and analyze it within the context. And within that, there are three general types of threat intelligence, depending on what you're looking to do. If you're looking at overall long-term goals, that's going to fall under the strategic cyber intelligence. If you're looking for current threats, and you want to see historical data on it, so if you're looking back in the history of an agency to see what they're going to possibly currently do, that would be under operational cyber threat intelligence. And then if something's imminent and it's going to happen right now, that would be tactical. And you want to perform threat intelligence if you're going to do threat attribution. So this would be taking that data, taking that context, performing the analysis on it, doing the threat intelligence to figure out which group performed the action you're studying. The different groups, I have listed 5 overall different types of groups. So advanced persistent threats, those are your nation state actors. Organized crime, that would be ransomware. So many businesses get hit by that all the time. You have your insider threats, hacktivists, and script kiddies. And an important part of all this is that each of these groups have different motivations, they have different styles. Advanced persistent threats are going to be a lot more sneaky and behind the scenes in how they do stuff. Organized crime, ransomware, Ryu can get their stuff from deployed in your network to encrypted in just a couple hours. They don't really care about making noise. They can encrypt your data and get money out of you. That's all that really matters. So you use threat intelligence and their motivations and all that to perform threat attribution. And this may be done, as I mentioned, ransomware in an instant response process. So up on the screen, I have the process for NIST on the left from NIST 861, and the process from SANS on the right. They're pretty similar. In the process, SANS, as you see down below, has one more step in the process, but they're all very cyclical. So every step may lead in preparation, leads into detection analysis, and that may lead into containment, but then you might also detect something else. And so you have to keep cycling back and forth, and you would use the information gathered through your threat intelligence to help you with identification and analysis. And so we'll have students in class kind of going through an incident and going through the steps in these IR processes. And next, we're going to move on to primary threats.
Hello, everyone. I'm back, and we're disgustingly over time. So guess what I'm going to do? I'm going fast. Yeah, so counterintelligence. I only picked this part of counterintelligence, but mind you, this is going to take over like, access controls. It's going to, go over failures in actual intelligence gathering, showing how that all can, just literally blow up on itself. But one of them is threat vectors and controls. And by this, I mean, let's talk about internal and external threats. A lot of you have taken CSEC 101 before. This is going to seem disgustingly familiar, but we're going to talk about it anyway. So, on this, internal threats. Where do they tend to arise from? Within a trusted sphere of operations versus external threats, which are generally defined as having no concrete tie to the internals, right? And we're going to go over these stupid acronyms again. First of which being Mises. Anybody remembers Mises? I'm sorry, you might have been in my class that I TA'd for. But yeah, money, ego, entertainment, cause, entrance, and status. These are all reasons that an attacker may or may not be doing something sketchy to your network or otherwise. They could be doing it for money. They could be doing it just, get a rise off of actually doing it. Entertainment kind of ties in with that. They could be going for a cause. Those are the hacktivists that Emily talked about, or just the status of elevating themselves in the threat actor community. Now, there's a question here. Motivations vary obviously based on insider and external origin. Which of these are more likely to motivate an internal threat versus an external threat? I'll let that sink in because, like I said, we're way over time. Think about that as we decide on creating internal threats now. That we have the idea that we had Mises, the motivating factors, but rascals, the second dumb acronym of the day, captures how a threat actor may create an internal threat at your organization. And this is really fun too because this was used by government to kind of suggest ways of making spies. But I mean, what's really the difference between an internal threat and a spy when you think about it? You can have people going in there offering reciprocative benefits. A little quid pro quo, a little something for something, no problem. You could have an appeal to authority coming in there, which would be, just an internal threat, looking up to someone on the outside and getting their orders because they view them as more important than maybe one of their employers. Scarcity, things aren't around for long, got to take advantage of it while it lasts. Consistency and commitment. That kind of suggests that there's been an established relationship previously, and it wants to be continued. Liking is kind of just like the same one. Honestly, it's kind of in there twice. Yeah, personal connections more like. And then social proof. Now, this isn't social proof as in like, oh, it's proof from social. It's social as in there is proof from the social interactions. I get that confused all the time. But this is everybody else is jumping off the bridge. Why not? Now, on that, who might an external threat target to gain the best access to sensitive info in your organization and how? So this is another one of those questions which suggest the idea that you might want to go into a bit of an audit of your personnel and kind of like drill into why they specifically could be targeted for candidacy as an internal threat, what they could provide, and just generally checking up on those individuals. Protect your people, make sure they're all good. You're probably going to be fine against internal threats most of the time. So the mitigations, what can we do? How do we control it? Good questions. We have a few categories here: disgruntled employees, customers, vendors, business partners, and the contractors and temps. For the disgruntled employees, you can make sure to conduct exit interviews. You could really try to drill down on making sure that they're being vigilant as well of questionable connections coming from the outside, as well as mandatory vacations on these people if you have the inkling that they may be up to something suspicious. I use the whole word. I don't like some of you people this time. Geez. So that's important. You can kind of get a little bit of buffer zone between the employee and yourself as you investigate them that way. Customers, you want NDAs, you want contractual sign-ons, strangleholds of a sort. Really just make sure they're not allowed to do anything spooky with your data. It's a good one. Vendors. So vendors are people or companies that supply stuff to your company or business. You want to restrict access, just like really, really hard. I've done a presentation on SolarWinds in the past 3 days. Restrict access. Make sure you know where everything's coming from. A supply chain attack is devastating. Typically, though, these are not going to be intentional. If a vendor gets breached, you're probably getting breached. business partners, background checks on people you're working with, and contractors and temps. Again, kind of look at employees as well, but clean desk policies also would work here. External threats and mitigations. You're not really going to be able to mitigate these too much, especially if they're governments. Yeah, if they're governments, good luck. If they're competitions, hacktivists, organized crime, or hired guns, you can generally look into a few more specific mitigations. Really just focus down on your OPSEC. Like, that is huge. We have an entire presentation about this in the course as well. As well as physical and digital hardening. Make sure your doors are locked, make sure your ports are locked, usual stuff. Regular network and physical assessments, audit everything, and just pay attention to the quality over the speed of your infrastructure. Having something work quick is fine, dare I say even required, but it doesn't matter if it's able to be easily breached. This is the time we would take questions, but as I will say a third time, we are disgustingly over time. Wyatt is left, so is Bran, and no, he hasn't? No?
He said, "Oh, my group left."
I'm still here. Emily's still here.
Round of applause for all of you. We're applauding for them in spirit.
Oh yeah, obviously.
Brendan's stuff is.
Yeah, that's it.
I think Brendan's outside. I think he was doing. You guys got like eight questions on your CTF challenges, so people.
I didn't make this.
They just went to answer them, I believe.
Okay.
Now we got this loser talking about privacy or something.
You must take me to your home base. It's just like
We have a large number of non-CSEC people in here right now. We got an SC, we got a CS. Used to be CS until we inducted her.
You got Zoom installed on?
Wild.
Whoa, dude, John B. Bauer. Plug it up. Initial, bro. I need to know what
I have
it
the most
is.
generic middle name ever existed.
What is it?
And I thought to myself, I need some cooking.
Why is my phone vibrating?
So I went to get some cooking sherry, and I saw a bottle of bourbon. That
Hold
also
on.
had sherry.
Michael.
Just walking around, just like.
John
great.
How many been presentations do you guys have? Last one.
I've gotten to check out like
Oh, and I don't know if we decided posting the IP address because the Discord is a good idea. It's not, because of course I then gave Rob Olson the security code, so he could actually mess with all the stuff now if he wants. Just saying.
It's on the live stream.
So it's not allowed to be
No,
in school, it's not allowed to work. Yeah, I wish it could have stayed until May.
I don't think you have a good time down there, bro.
I've been in there.
I don't like that this is reflected.
It's like half
do,
actually. I had like curfew
something's
going,
not
so
that.
it's like
Here, come here. You
I
can
ended
buy
up in here since the
Couldn't
beginning.
see me from no.
I said stop being reflective.
Like, I
Where
now
do I
extended the curfew to like 10 p.m. for like businesses and being outside your house. But at some point it was like 5 p.m. and like you couldn't go out.
Where the fuck do I sign up? I was like, I'm in the United States. I'm curfew nothing.
Yeah. Like National Guards in the streets, and they would just like take, and then they release you for the next day.
That's crazy.
We need to do something.
That's nuts.
But, like other than that, like I went to the beach so many times, but there was like no big parties, no clubs, so
Next presentation, because I actually want to pay attention. Not that I haven't been, but I think the CTF has settled down enough.
You disappear now.
Mine disappeared in like 38 days.
It's mostly designed not to be displaced to the people.
You could vaguely, well, you could have seen the screens when they were on.
Yeah. You still see them.
Yeah, but it's like you can half see them. It's still over the trash.
I know. I'm just wishing that someday my job is going to go up and then I apply.
Oh, you're the host.
It's really annoying.
Are you just waiting for the billet?
Yeah. They can't put the billet up until 30 days before I graduate.
Oh my god.
And then even then, if once the billet's up, they
Yeah.
put my resume
The thing
in. They
is,
put
you're
me in
supposed to
as
look
the
at
first candidate.
where your slides
I
are.
just give through their HR system.